The night my parents told me my dream was too risky after I asked for $70,000 to launch my tech startup, something deep inside me quietly fractured. I had clients lined up and a functioning prototype, yet they dismissed me like I was handing them a fragile fantasy instead of a future. I tried to swallow the hurt, but what followed shattered every belief I had about loyalty, family, and what people will do when desperation tightens around them. I'm Ayla, and for as long as I can remember, I learned how to shrink within the walls of my own home. From the street, our brick house in Austin looked warm and welcoming, but inside, everything revolved around one person, my younger sister Rosie. I was the steady, quiet achiever, while Rosie was the dazzling centerpiece, adored and endlessly funded like she was born to shine. At 16, all I wanted was a used car so I wouldn't melt on the bus in the brutal Texas heat. My parents told me it wasn't necessary and that I could manage without it. I believed them until Rosie turned 16 and a brand new car rolled into our backyard party under fairy lights while everyone cheered. Once, I begged for $500 to attend a summer coding camp at a university, explaining every benefit it would bring me. My mother simply said it was a waste and that I could learn online for free. 2 weeks later, Rosie was flown to New York for a $12,000 acting program, complete with new suitcases and a celebratory dinner. It wasn't only the money, it was how the room shifted whenever she walked in. When I won first place in a statewide science competition, I came home trembling with pride. But relatives were too busy praising Rosie's ballet photos to even look at my certificate beyond a quick "That's nice, honey." My award disappeared under a pile of magazines by the end of the night, and from then on, I became independent out of necessity. I cooked my own meals, handled my schoolwork alone, and trained myself not to expect applause. When I secured a partial scholarship to a prestigious university, all my parents said was that living expenses would be high, while Rosie got a full family-thrown farewell party for her arts program. Yet a tiny part of me still hoped adulthood might shift something, that hard work would finally matter. I worked late nights, picked up extra shifts, and dreamed of building something meaningful. I thought proving myself would make them finally see me. But some patterns cling harder than time itself. After graduating and stepping into the tech world, I worked harder than I ever had. Long nights, brutal deadlines, and no one to catch me if I fell. Slowly, I saved $40,000 through discipline, overtime, and sacrificing every luxury. Then one day, everything aligned: a major gap in the construction industry, a prototype, and 8 companies ready to commit once the product launched. My idea wasn't a dream anymore, it was real, feasible, and waiting to be built. All I needed was $70,000 to bring it to life. So I did something I almost never allowed myself to do. I hoped my parents would finally choose me. I flew home for the weekend carrying printed plans, revenue projections, and a polished demo like they were pieces of my future. I rehearsed in the mirror for hours, imagining the rare chance my parents might finally look at me with pride. Standing in their living room with my laptop open and my heart racing, I truly believed this moment could rewrite our entire history. But when I finished, my father simply lowered his newspaper, unimpressed, and said, "It's too risky." My mother nodded in agreement, insisting I stick to my stable job and avoid ruining my life over a dream. They didn't ask a single question, didn't glance at a number, didn't even pretend to care. I closed my laptop quietly, swallowing the sting like it was something I'd practiced my whole life. I reminded myself disappointment wasn't new, that it wasn't supposed to surprise me anymore. But what came next wasn't disappointment at all, what came next was betrayal. A few months later, while I was debugging code past midnight in my tiny apartment, my mother called, sounding breathless with excitement. She announced Rosie was starting a luxury event company in Dallas, and the whole family was helping her launch. Then she told me the real number: $725,000, a new BMW for her image, a trendy office space, designer wardrobes, and lavish networking parties. Everything that was too risky for me was suddenly worth pouring money into for her. I stared at the wall for a long time after that call, my chest tight and my vision blurring. I wasn't naive about their favoritism, but this was no longer about preference. This was a decision that showed exactly where I stood. In that small apartment lit only by my computer's glow, something shifted in me. It wasn't anger yet, just a cold, cutting clarity I couldn't unsee. I finally understood that no matter how hard I worked, they would always choose Rosie. Once I accepted that truth, I made the hardest decision of my life. I mortgaged my tiny San Jose condo and combined that loan with the $40,000 I had scraped together. Signing papers that tied my entire future to a fragile idea and an empty bank account was terrifying, but the fear was mine, and that made it bearable. I rented a small office in a worn-down industrial building on the edge of the city. The paint was peeling, the heater clanked like it was begging for retirement, and the ceiling leaked every time it rained. But to me, it felt like the first real beginning I'd ever had. I hired Miguel, a sharp new graduate, and Rachel, who handled clients and logistics with steady warmth. The three of us gathered around a dented thrift store table, sketching wireframes, mapping features, and cold calling anyone who might listen. Then reality struck harder than we expected. The first few months nearly broke us. We worked 18-hour days and lived on cheap sandwiches and instant noodles. I coded until my wrists throbbed and my eyes burned, fighting bugs I couldn't even explain. Some days potential clients vanished without warning, taking our hope with them. Then came the hardest hit of all. A mid-sized construction company that had promised to sign a major contract backed out with a cold, emotionless email. That contract was supposed to save us, and without it, our budget dissolved on the spot. I sat alone in the dark office long after Miguel and Rachel left, staring at the nearly empty spreadsheet like it was some kind of omen. Rain tapped against the cracked window, each drop a reminder of how fragile everything felt. For a moment, I wondered if my parents had been right all along. Maybe it really was too risky. Maybe believing anyone would bet on me was foolish from the start. But then I remembered the sound of my father folding his newspaper, the flat finality in his voice, and something inside me hardened into resolve. I refused to fail in a way that would ever validate their doubts. Just when we were on the edge of collapsing, an unexpected email surfaced in our inbox. A construction company in Sacramento wanted to pilot our software for a full year. It wasn't a massive contract, but it was real, steady, and the first solid revenue we'd seen in months. When we finally signed it, the three of us sat on the office floor eating dollar store pizza, laughing and crying in the same breath. For the first time, hope didn't feel imaginary. As build flow slowly stabilized, news from Austin drifted in like distant thunder. Rosie's luxury event company was unraveling fast, expenses exploding, clients disappearing, and the BMW she flaunted everywhere eventually repossessed. My parents were sinking under the weight of her debt, and suddenly their eyes turned toward me. The first call came on a Thursday evening right after a meeting about our newest update. My phone buzzed relentlessly until I finally picked up. My mother's voice shook the moment she spoke. "Ayla, we need your help. The bank is threatening to take the house. If you could send $100,000, we can cover part of the debt." For a moment, the world went silent. $100,000, the same money I'd earned through sleepless nights and relentless work. Before I could process, my father grabbed the phone. "You're successful now," he said coldly. "We raised you. We invested in you. It's time to repay the family." Then he added the words that sliced through me like a blade. "Sell your home if you need to. My condo, the place I mortgaged. The lifeline that kept my company alive was reduced to a disposable asset." I swallowed tightly. "Dad, I can't," I said, voice low. "This condo is all I have. It's the foundation of everything I built." Silence followed, then a heavy sigh. "So you're choosing yourself over your family," he accused. Something inside me didn't break, it clarified. "I'm choosing fairness," I replied softly, something I never received. My mother began to cry, and my father muttered about ingratitude. I hung up before their guilt could smother me again. The next week was torture calls, voicemails, and texts flooded in nonstop. Rosie sent paragraphs dripping with entitlement. "You're the only one who can save us. You owe us. Stop being selfish," but nothing prepared me for what happened next. The doorbell rang on a warm autumn afternoon in San Jose, sharp, urgent, relentless. When I opened it, my parents stood there with Rosie beside them. My father looked stern, my mother exhausted, and Rosie had her arms crossed with a look that painted her as the victim. "We need to talk," my father said, stepping past me uninvited. They settled awkwardly on my small couch, visibly uneasy in a home that didn't fit Rosie's former luxury. I stood across from them, a calm wall separating us. My mother started gently, trying to slip under my defenses. Ayla, what happened with Rosie's company? No one could have predicted it. She just needs time. We all do. I said nothing, waiting. My father leaned forward, eyes stern. You have the ability to help. All we're asking is that you sell this place. Use the money to save the family. Rosie finally spoke, her tone dripping with accusation. I didn't mean for things to fall apart, but you're doing well now. Why can't you do something for us for once? The word once almost made me laugh. I took a steady breath before answering. For once? Rosie, you've been handed everything your entire life. Ballet classes, camps, cars, a $725,000 loan, I continued. And when I asked for $70,000 after years of building something real, you told me it was too risky. I looked at them all. Do you hear yourselves? Rosie rolled her eyes. That was different. I stared directly at her. How? I asked quietly. Explain the difference. Her mouth opened, closed, then stayed silent. My father cut in quickly. We believed in her dream. She needed help. His gaze hardened. You didn't. My voice stayed steady, but it vibrated in the heavy silence. When I asked for $70,000, I had a working prototype, confirmed clients, and a plan. Everything you claimed to value: responsibility, preparation, discipline. I lived it. But you looked me in the face, I said, and said it was too risky. My mother's eyes filled with tears. We didn't want you to struggle, she whispered. I met her gaze without blinking. I struggled anyway. The room tightened around us, still and suffocating. I continued, each word deliberate. When Rosie wanted a BMW to look successful, you borrowed an impossible amount without hesitation. When her company failed, you protected her from every consequence. When the debt grew, you blamed luck, timing, everything but her choices, I said. But when I built something real, something that survived, you barely acknowledged it. My father shifted, clearly uncomfortable. We trusted you to take care of yourself, he said. I nodded slowly. That, I replied quietly, is exactly the difference. You trusted me to survive on my own, while you trusted her to be rescued every time she stumbled. Rosie huffed, defensive and dismissive. You're being dramatic. This is family, and families help each other. I looked at her with a sadness I didn't expect. Families also recognize effort, I said softly. They acknowledge sacrifice, and they don't ask their children to destroy the very things they fought to build. My father's tone sharpened instantly. So that's it. You'll let us lose everything. His words hit hard, but not in the way he hoped. For a moment, I saw the fear in them, the fear of losing their home, their pride, and the image they protected through Rosie. But then I remembered the nights I coded until sunrise, the meals I skipped, and the condo I nearly lost to make my company survive. When my voice finally came, it was steady and unshakable. I'm sorry you're struggling, I said, but I'm not selling my home. My mother cried. Rosie scoffed, and my father shook his head in disappointment. They waited for me to crack, to apologize, to fold, but I didn't. It came out quiet, but it carried. Every year I was overlooked, every dream dismissed, and every wound they ignored. Rosie shot to her feet. You're heartless, she snapped. I didn't move, no. I answered, I'm finally done being your backup plan. My father's expression hardened. You'll regret this, he warned. I walked to the door, opened it, and stepped aside. I already spent a lifetime regretting things that were never mine to carry, I said. Slowly, they all rose and walked past me, each step marking the end of something I had tried far too long to fix. My mother paused in the doorway, eyes pleading for a version of me that didn't exist anymore. I stayed silent. I didn't apologize. I closed the door softly, firm, certain, final. I leaned against it, letting the quiet settle around me. Tears came, then faded. Not because I didn't hurt, but because choosing myself finally felt right instead of selfish. The next 6 months unfolded in a strange and quiet distance. I didn't block their numbers, but the calls simply stopped. Even the guilt evaporated. All that remained were occasional updates from people back in Austin, updates I listened to without reacting. The red brick house I grew up in was eventually mortgaged, then listed for sale. My father pulled from his retirement early while my mother buried her time in church. Rosie moved in with her boyfriend, posting carefully staged photos that failed to hide her downfall. Meanwhile, BuildFlow surged forward with new contracts and long-term partnerships. We doubled our team and upgraded to a brighter office in a busier part of town. I left my tiny condo for a peaceful rental house in Palo Alto with a little garden that felt like breathing room for my entire life. Some nights I sat outside with coffee, listening to the quiet hum of the neighborhood. The pain didn't disappear, but it softened. In its place grew something stronger, the certainty that choosing myself wasn't abandonment, it was survival. Saying no didn't break my family. It simply exposed what had been fractured all along. I walked away from the guilt, the expectations, and the years of being the dependable one who never deserved investment. And by choosing myself, I created a life built not on approval but on peace. If you've ever had to set a boundary that shook your world, tell me where you're watching from. Your story matters, Em.